The airlock hissed open, and Damien Court stepped into the place he had chosen to die. The alien outpost sprawled before him in the dim emergency lighting, a vast chamber of curved walls and biomechanical architecture that looked more grown than built. Dust covered every surface. The air tasted stale but breathable, filtered through systems that had run on autopilot for who knew how many years. According to the salvage broker who sold him the deed, this station had been abandoned for at least 2 decades. Perfect. No one would find him here. No one would try to stop him. Damien pressed a hand to his chest, feeling the irregular flutter of his failing heart beneath the skin. Stage 4 cardiomyopathy. Inoperable. The human doctors had given him 4 months. The alien physicians he had consulted afterward confirmed the diagnosis with added detail about how his specific genetic markers made him incompatible with synthetic organ replacement. 4 months of slowly drowning as his heart lost the ability to pump blood. 4 months of increasing pain, confusion, and helplessness. 4 months of watching the pity in everyone's eyes grow heavier. He had chosen a different path. He would spend his final weeks here, in solitude, on his own terms. When the pain became unbearable, he had brought enough medication to ensure a peaceful end. No hospitals. No interventions. No forcing him to suffer for the comfort of others who could not let go. The station had cost him everything he owned, but money meant nothing when you were dying. The salvage broker had been desperate to unload the property. Some obscure alien species had built it, then abandoned it without explanation. No one knew why. No one cared. The fringe territories were full of such mysteries. Damien activated his portable terminal, bringing the station's systems online. Lights flickered to life throughout the complex. Environmental controls engaged, cycling fresh air through the ventilation. Gravity generators hummed as they stabilized at Earth-normal levels. The main chamber was enormous, easily 100 meters across. Organic-looking pillars supported a domed ceiling that displayed a holographic projection of the space outside. Stars glittered in the void. The nearby moon of Tarsus 9 hung like a gray pearl against the darkness. It was beautiful. A good place to end. Damien spent the first week exploring. The station had 17 levels, each one a maze of corridors and chambers whose original purposes remained unclear. Living quarters, perhaps. Research labs. Meditation spaces. The architecture suggested a species that thought very differently from humans. Walls curved in ways that made navigation disorienting. Rooms connected in nonlinear patterns. Some chambers seemed to have no purpose at all, just empty spaces that resonated with strange acoustics. He set up his meager belongings in a chamber that might have been crew quarters. A sleeping mat. His terminal. 3 cases of freeze-dried food that would last longer than he would. The medication that would let him choose his moment. The silence was absolute. For the first time in months, no one was asking him how he felt. No one was offering false hope. No one was crying. It should have been peaceful. Instead, he felt the weight of isolation pressing down like a physical force. On the 8th day, he woke to the sound of the airlock cycling. Damien bolted upright, his damaged heart hammering dangerously in his chest. Someone was here. Impossible. He had filed all the proper claim documentation. The station was legally his. No salvage crews should be anywhere near this sector. He grabbed the plasma cutter he had brought for repairs and made his way toward the main chamber, moving as quietly as possible. His breathing came in short gasps, the exertion was already pushing his cardiovascular system to its limits. The inner airlock door opened. A figure stepped through. Not human. The alien stood nearly 3 meters tall, its body covered in overlapping plates of chitinous armor that shimmered with iridescent colors. 6 limbs, 4 legs and 2 arms supported its mass. The head was elongated, featuring compound eyes that glowed with inner light and mandibles that clicked rhythmically. A crest of bony protrusions ran along its spine. Damien had never seen this species before. The galaxy was home to thousands of sapient races, and he had only encountered a few dozen during his 38 years. The aliens saw him and froze. For a long moment, neither moved. Then the alien spoke, its voice translated by the universal comm system into flat, synthesized standard. "You are in my home." "This is my station," Damien said, raising the plasma cutter defensively. "I bought it legally. I have the documentation. You need to leave." The alien's mandibles clicked faster, agitation, if Damien had to guess. "I never sold this place. This is Velrith clan property. You are trespassing." The salvage broker said it was abandoned. "Unclaimed. I paid good money for the deed." "Salvage broker?" The alien, presumably Velrith, made a sound like grinding stone. "This station has been in my family for 6 generations. I left it temporarily. I did not abandon it." "Temporarily? For 20 years? 20 years is nothing." Velrith moved forward, and Damien instinctively stepped back. "For my species, that is barely a pause. I left to pursue research. I intended to return. And now I have." Damien felt rage building beneath his exhaustion. This could not be happening. He had come here to die in peace. He had spent everything to secure this one small piece of the galaxy where he could end things on his terms. And now some alien was claiming he had no right to be here? "I do not care about your intentions," he said, his voice shaking. "This station is mine. The Galactic Commerce Authority recognized the sale. If you have a dispute, take it up with them. But you need to leave. Now." Velritha's compound eyes studied him with unsettling intensity. "You are ill." The observation caught Damien off guard. "What?" "Your biology is failing. I can see it in your thermal signature. Your cardiovascular system is compromised. You are dying." The blunt assessment hit Damien like a physical blow. "That is none of your business. You came here to die alone." It was not a question. Velrith tilted its head, mandibles working in a pattern that might have indicated contemplation. "That is why you were willing to pay for a station in the middle of nowhere. You are running from death, so you came to embrace it in solitude." "I am not running from anything," Damien snapped. "I am choosing how I go out. There is a difference." "Is there?" Velrith moved past him, walking toward the center of the main chamber. "I also came here to end something. Perhaps we are not so different." Damien followed, unwilling to let the alien commandeer his space without a fight. Terminal illness be damned. "What are you talking about?" Velrith reached out with one articulated limb and touched a section of the wall. The biomechanical surface rippled in response, patterns of light flowing through it like bioluminescent currents. "This station was built by my great-great-grandmother. She was a xenobiologist who studied the evolution of consciousness across species. Her research took her to 1,000 worlds. When she grew old, she came here to compile her life's work. She died in this very chamber, surrounded by the sum total of her knowledge." The lights grew brighter, and suddenly the walls came alive with data. Holographic displays materialized showing alien species Damien did not recognize. Star charts marked with symbols he could not read. Complex equations that hurt to look at. "My grandmother continued the work," Velrith said quietly. "Then my mother. Then me. For generations, each adding to the research. Each one coming here to study, to learn, to contribute something meaningful to the understanding of life itself." "If this place is so important, why did you leave?" Damien asked. "Because I failed." The admission seemed to pain Velrith. Its bioluminescent patterns dimmed. "I spent 40 years trying to solve a single question: why do some species develop consciousness while others do not? What is the mechanism that transforms simple awareness into true sapience? My ancestors made progress. I did not. I contributed nothing. I abandoned this place because I could not bear to face my inadequacy surrounded by their genius." Damien understood that feeling more than he wanted to admit. "So you ran away?" "Yes. I ran. I told myself I would return when I had something worthy to add. But decades passed, and I discovered nothing of value. Now I am old. My time is limited. I came back to die where my ancestors died. To at least end my life in a place that meant something, even if I never contributed anything meaningful to it. They stood in silence, two dying creatures in a tomb of knowledge. You cannot die here, Damien said finally. This place is mine. Legally. Whatever arrangement your family had, it ended when the property was classified as abandoned. I have the documentation. I have the rights. Then we have a problem, Velrith said. Because I refuse to leave. This station is my birthright. My family's legacy. I will die here whether you approve or not. Damien raised the plasma cutter. I will remove you by force if necessary. Velritha's mandibles spread wide, laughter, perhaps. You can barely stand. Your heart is failing with every breath. Do you truly think you can force me to do anything? The observation was accurate and infuriating. Damien felt his vision blur at the edges. The argument had pushed his damaged heart too far. He needed to sit down. He needed his medication. But he refused to show weakness. This is my place to die, he said through gritted teeth. Mine. Not yours. I need this. I need somewhere quiet. Somewhere alone. Do not take that from me. Something in Velritha's posture changed. The aggression faded. You purchased an entire station. Surely it is large enough for two dying beings to share. I did not come here for company. Neither did I. But perhaps isolation is not what either of us truly needs. Damien wanted to argue. He wanted to scream at this interloper to leave his purchased solitude alone. But his heart was hammering irregularly, and black spots were dancing in his vision. He stumbled, and Velrith moved with surprising speed, one armored limb catching him before he fell. Your medication is in the crew quarters 3 corridors west, Velrith said. I can help you there. How do you know where my things are? This is my station. I know every chamber. Velrith half carried him through the winding corridors. Despite his protests, Damien lacked the strength to resist. They reached his small room, and Velrith gently lowered him onto the sleeping mat. The alien located his medication case with unerring accuracy and brought it over. Damien took the cardiac stabilizer with shaking hands. The medication worked quickly, bringing his heart rate back down to something approaching normal. The pain in his chest eased. You should rest, Velrith said. Exertion is dangerous in your condition. I know my condition better than you do. I doubt that. I spent 40 years studying biology. I may have failed to answer the great questions, but I can certainly recognize system failure when I see it. Damien closed his eyes. Just leave me alone. As you wish. Velrith moved toward the door, then paused. I will be in the research archive on level 7 if you need assistance. Despite our dispute over ownership, I would prefer you did not die from simple medical neglect. That would be wasteful. After Velrith left, Damien lay in the dark and tried to summon his earlier anger. But exhaustion overwhelmed everything else. Within minutes, he was asleep. He woke hours later to find food waiting beside his sleeping mat. Not the freeze-dried rations he had brought, but something freshly prepared. It smelled good. His stomach, which had been unreliable for weeks, actually growled with hunger. There was a note in translated standard: you cannot die on an empty stomach. That is simply poor planning. Despite himself, Damien smiled. Over the following days, an uneasy coexistence developed. Damien kept to his corner of the station. Velrith worked in the research archives. They crossed paths occasionally but rarely spoke beyond brief acknowledgments. Yet slowly, Damien found himself curious about what Velrith was doing. The research archives were filled with xenobiological data spanning hundreds of species. Evolution, neurology, cognitive development, The accumulated knowledge was staggering. On the fifth day of their shared isolation, Damien found himself standing at the entrance to the archive chamber, watching Velrith work. The alien was manipulating holographic models of neural structures, comparing patterns across different species. Its movements were precise but somehow sad. The posture of someone going through motions without hope. "Can I help you?" Velrith asked without looking up. "I was just wondering what you are working on." The question that has haunted me for 40 years. The mechanism of sapient emergence. I am re-examining data my grandmother collected from 300 different worlds. Perhaps she saw something I missed. Perhaps not. At this point, I am simply occupying my remaining time with familiar failure. Damien stepped closer. "Show me." Velrith's compound eyes turned toward him. "You are interested in xenobiology?" "I am interested in distraction. Dying is boring. Show me what you are doing." So Velrith explained. The research focused on identifying the common factors present in species that develop true consciousness versus those that remain instinct-driven despite complex nervous systems. Velrith's ancestors had identified 17 potential markers. Chemical, structural, genetic. But none of them were universal. Some sapient species lacked markers that non-sapient species possessed. The pattern remained elusive. "What if there is no pattern?" Damien asked after an hour of explanation. "What if consciousness just happens randomly?" "Then everything my family worked for was meaningless," Velrith said. "And I cannot accept that. There must be order. There must be reason. The universe is not random chaos." "Why not?" "Chaos feels pretty accurate from where I am standing." Velrith made that grinding stone sound again. "You are dying of a genetic condition that could have been prevented if humans properly screened embryos before birth. Your situation is not chaos. It is merely unfortunate genetics. Cause and effect. Pattern and consequence. That is supposed to make me feel better?" "No. But it is true." They worked together after that. Damien had no formal training in xenobiology, but he could ask questions. Sometimes the questions were useful. Often they were not. But Velrith seemed to appreciate having someone to talk to, even if that someone was a dying human with no relevant expertise. Days turned into weeks. Damien's condition continued to deteriorate. Some mornings he could barely get out of bed. Other days were better, and he spent hours in the archives, learning about species he had never heard of, studying evolutionary pathways that challenged everything he thought he knew about life. He still had the medication that would let him end things. The case sat in his quarters, unopened. Waiting. But somehow the urgency had faded. He was still dying. His heart was still failing. But dying while helping Velrith search for answers felt different than dying alone in silence. One night, or what passed for night in a station without day/night cycles, Damien found Velrith sitting in the main chamber, staring up at the holographic display of the stars. "Are you all right?" Damien asked. "I have been thinking about your question. About chaos. About randomness." Velrith's bioluminescent patterns pulsed slowly. "What if consciousness is not the result of specific biological markers? What if it emerges from something else entirely? Something we cannot measure with scans and genetic analysis? Like what? I do not know. That is the problem. My entire methodology assumes that consciousness is a biological phenomenon. But what if it is not? What if it is something else? Something that uses biology but is not defined by it?" Damien sat down beside the massive alien. "You are talking about souls. Spirits. Metaphysical nonsense. Am I? How do you define consciousness?" "Not the neural activity, I can measure that. But the actual experience of being aware. Of being you. What is that? Where does it come from?" "I have no idea." "Neither do I. And that terrifies me more than death. I have spent my entire life trying to understand the most fundamental question of existence, and I have failed completely. They sat in silence. Two failures. Two beings approaching their end with nothing to show for their lives. I was a cargo hauler, Damien said suddenly. 20 years moving freight between stations. No family. No close friends. Nothing particularly meaningful. When the doctors told me I was dying, I realized my entire existence could be summed up in a single paragraph. Born. Worked. Died. That was it. That was the sum total of Damien Court. At least you did not fail at something important, Velrith said. You simply lived a quiet life. I had the chance to continue my family's legacy, to solve mysteries that would benefit thousands of species, and I accomplished nothing. So we are both pointless. It would seem so. Damien laughed, the sound bitter. You know what the funny part is? I came here to die alone because I thought facing death with dignity meant doing it in isolation. No pity. No false comfort. Just me and the inevitable. But now I am here with you, and I realize dying alone would have been worse than dying with pity. At least pity means someone cares. Velrith's mandibles clicked in what might have been agreement. I told myself I was coming here to honor my ancestors by dying where they died. But truthfully, I was running. I could not face the possibility of dying surrounded by people who knew I had failed. Better to die alone than to die in shame. We are both cowards. Apparently so. They laughed together, the sound echoing strangely in the vast chamber. The next morning, Damien woke to find Velrith in a state of intense excitement. The alien was manipulating holographic displays at frantic speed, pulling up datasets and running complex analyses. What happened? Damien asked. I think I found it. Last night, after our conversation, I started thinking about consciousness differently. Not as a biological state but as an emergent property. Like how individual neurons firing create thoughts. None of the neurons are conscious, but together they create consciousness. What if sapience emerges not from specific biology but from specific types of complexity? Not just neural complexity, but network complexity. Connection. Relationship. Velrith pulled up comparative data. Look. Every sapient species in my database shares one thing that non-sapient species lack. Not a gene. Not a structure. But a threshold of social complexity. Sapient species form relationships. They communicate. They share information across generations. Non-sapient species might have sophisticated brains, but they live in isolation. They do not build on what came before. So consciousness requires community? Consciousness requires connection. The biological markers do not matter. What matters is whether a species develops the capacity to link individual minds into something larger. Language. Culture. Shared knowledge. That is the pattern. Not biology. Sociology. Damien studied the data. He lacked the expertise to verify Velrith's hypothesis, but the pattern was visible even to him. Every sapient species showed high degrees of social integration. Every non-sapient species existed in relative isolation. Your grandmother collected this data 60 years ago, Damien said. Why did she miss this? Because she was looking at biology. We all were. We assumed consciousness was a product of individual complexity. But it is not. It is a product of collective complexity. You cannot become truly conscious alone. You need others. Connection creates consciousness. The irony was crushing. They had both come here to die alone, running from connection. And the answer to Velrith's life's work was that isolation was antithetical to the very thing they were studying. I think you solved it, Damien said quietly. Velrith's bioluminescent patterns blazed with colors Damien had never seen before. I need to verify this across more datasets. I need to test it against species my family never catalogued. This could be it. This could actually be it. For the next 3 days, Velrith worked with intensity bordering on obsession. Damien helped where he could, but mostly he watched as the alien tested hypothesis against data, finding confirmation again and again. The pattern held. Consciousness emerged from connection. Isolation prevented it. On the 4th day, Velrith stopped working and turned to Damien. Thank you. For what? You did all the work. You asked the right question. You made me think differently. Without you, I would have died still searching for an answer that was right in front of me. Glad I could help. Velrith was quiet for a moment. How long do you have left? The question was direct in the way only the dying could ask. Damien checked his medical readouts. Weeks. Maybe less. My heart is deteriorating faster than expected. Too much activity. Too much excitement. I should probably rest more. But honestly, I would rather spend my last days helping you than lying in bed waiting for the end. I have a proposal. Remain here. Help me compile this research properly. We can transmit it to the Xenobiological Institute. Ensure the work is preserved. In exchange, I will make certain your final weeks are as comfortable as possible. You will not die alone. And neither will I. Damien felt something crack inside him. The wall he had built around his emotions, the shield that had let him decide to end his life alone, suddenly seemed transparent. I thought I wanted to be alone. We both did. We were both wrong. Consciousness requires connection. Perhaps dying with dignity requires it too. They worked together for the next 5 weeks. Damien's condition continued to decline, but Velrith adapted the station's environment to accommodate his needs. Lower gravity to ease the strain on his heart. Enriched oxygen to help his failing circulation. Medication carefully calibrated to his human biology. The research came together beautifully. Velrith compiled data spanning 6 generations of work, all of it pointing to the same conclusion. Consciousness was not a biological accident. It was the inevitable result of sufficient social complexity. Life connected to other life. Minds building on minds. They transmitted the completed research to the Xenobiological Institute 3 weeks before Damien died. The response came back within days. Velrith's hypothesis was being hailed as a breakthrough. Universities across the galaxy wanted to test it. The work of 6 generations was finally complete. You did it, Damien said. His voice was weak now. His heart struggling with even basic function. You solved the mystery. We did it, Velrith corrected. You were part of this. Your questions mattered. I moved cargo for 20 years. And then you helped solve one of the greatest mysteries of consciousness. Your life was not meaningless, Damien Court. You mattered. Damien died 2 weeks later, not alone in silence but surrounded by the knowledge he had helped preserve. Velrith was with him at the end, one massive claw resting gently on his shoulder. Thank you for returning my home, Velrith said. Thank you for reminding me that isolation is death and connection is life. Damien managed a weak smile. Thank you for ruining my plan to die alone. I thought I wanted that. I was wrong. His last words were barely a whisper. Tell them I mattered. I will, Velrith promised. The research will carry both our names. Generations will know that you helped answer the question. You will not be forgotten. Damien closed his eyes and let go. Velrith remained in the station for another year, continuing the research and expanding on the breakthrough they had achieved together. When the alien finally died peacefully, at the end of a long and now meaningful life, the station was designated a historical site. A monument to the connection that had saved 2 lives from meaningless ends. The deed to the station remained in Damien Court's name. But beside it, the record showed a note, shared with Velrith clan. Proof that consciousness requires connection, and dying with purpose requires the same. Two beings had come to that station to die alone. Instead, they had found meaning in each other. They had solved a mystery that spanned generations. They had proven that isolation was death and connection was life. And in the end, neither of them died alone. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video and subscribe for more. Thank you.